Nigeria's manufacturing sector sunk deeper into deficit as imports of manufactured goods outpaced exports by more than 14 trillion naira in the first half of 2025. According to the NBS, the value of manufactured goods imported between January and June stood at 15.39 trillion naira, while exports during the same period amounted to 1.09 trillion naira, creating a deficit of 14.3 trillion naira in only 6 months. What emerges is not simply a trade gap, but a broader indictment of Nigeria's inability to build a competitive, self-sustaining manufacturing base. To unpack this, I am joined by Dr. Femi Egbesola, President, Association of Small Business Owners of Nigeria, ASBON. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining me today.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
But before we get into this, let me get your thoughts on the MPC's 50 basis points cut in the monetary policy rate. I bet that was one good news you sort of expected. I mean, we've been on it for a while now, so let me get your thoughts on it.
Yes, our day came to a beautiful end yesterday when we got the news that at least there was a cut, even though marginal, and that's broadly welcome. And it means that it is going to somehow moderate inflation and help us to lower the cost of borrowing, particularly for small businesses. But then we see this still as a short-term approach to the challenges of MSMEs. We believe that more still needs to be done. We need to open up access to credit. We need to stabilize FX. We need to ensure that we have regular and cheap power. And we need to be able to get our input for manufacturing easily and at good cost. So if all of this combined together with that good news, I think it will really work for MSMEs.
All right, that's interesting. Now back to our conversation for today. The data, that's the NBS data, shows that the import of manufactured goods outpaced exports by 14.3 trillion naira in the first half of this year. Is that disturbing?
Very disturbing. To me, it is very disturbing because it's not just a trade statistics. It's also an evidence that Nigeria is not producing enough. We are not producing enough finished goods and, of course, enough processed goods. And this is very important if we want to grow our economy. We must be able to meet domestic and external demands. So when we have this, data, it's also showing that we have structural problems. We need to begin to look at how to fix some of the structural problems we have to be able to compete globally in the trade market. Some of it is because our product has low value addition. Some of them are not competitive enough because of cost and quality. And there are also supply chain gaps here and there. So I think this is a call for coordination among all MDAs of government, also among the private sector, to be able to work together to ensure that this issue is tackled. And as such, by first quarter next year, there's a change in the numbers.
All right, you mentioned two things. The first among them is we're not producing enough, and you also talked about structural problems. And I bet this isn't new to us, but let's talk a bit about the challenges. Chief amongst them is the high cost of energy, which takes up to 40% of operational cost. So talk to us. How do we begin to address these issues, especially beginning with this particular one? I mean, what are the available options for drastically reducing that 40% cost, either on the policy side or even on private sector side?
For me, I think the first thing government needs to do is to begin to prioritize our industrial centers. We have a number of industrial hubs here and there in Nigeria. And one way to prioritize it when it comes to energy is to give them special power, special electricity at a cheaper and consistent manner. And that will help to do a lot when it comes to bringing down the cost of operation when it comes to energy. Another thing I think we need to do is to be able to encourage the private sector to be able to have a mix between solar energy and other forms of alternative energy. And this can be possible if government is able to give some tax breaks when it comes to energy, to also ensure that there are some incentives and even access to further funds to be able to support these companies, these industries, to be able to afford and access alternative energy. It's also good for us to be looking at how companies can come together in one same zone, one same area, put funds together to provide for themselves same kind of energy that they can share together and at a reduced cost. Again, too, I think we need to also encourage manufacturers to also look at efficient way of generating energy too. Maybe sometimes they may need to begin to look at changing their generator to modern day generators and even some of their equipment to be able to save power. And I think if this is done, it will be good enough to help us boost power, reduce cost of energy, and make us more competitive in the trade market.
Right, away from that, I know there have been talks about, progress being made as a result of government reforms such that, locally manufactured goods have now become the darling of many Nigerians. Even on the shelves, they are doing better. I mean, I guess that number isn't enough to sort of offset the deficit we're seeing now. Speak to us about this. I mean, I would have thought that with that sort of progress, maybe we'll be able to reduce the deficit by now.
Well, the news is encouraging, and it's fine that we are having this now. But I must also say that popularity alone doesn't bridge structural gaps. Yes, many locally made goods still are not doing well in the market because of price, because of quality, sometimes because of not being export ready for being able to send our product out of the country. And also too, we have a number of issues along the value chain, particularly with local inputs. And again, too, finance has also been an issue. Many of those producing here that are also supposed to export are not having the capacity to be able to, and are not able to even match the volume of export that is being needed, even locally here, to meet the local demands, not to talk of export. So it's important for us all together, government and the private sector, to be able to look at some of these supply side constraints and prevent it from escalating beyond what we have at the moment.
All right. So two things you talked about, export ready and then quality. Talk to us about this. I mean, why is this an issue and how can this be solved? I would have thought there are measures, already out there that are supposed to address this issue of, Nigerian manufacturers, their products not being export ready and also looking at the quality side of things. Would you like to say a thing or two about that?
Yes, I think the first thing is that we need to begin to look at what products are we really in need of that are really demanded locally. If we are able to identify that, are we actually meeting up with the numbers, with the demands? If yes, how can we begin to scale to export to other countries? When all of this is being identified, then the next thing is for us to begin to look at how can we support those who are in that value chain so that they can produce more and be able to export. I must say it here that in some climes, you see 1 acre of farmland producing 10,000 tons of cassava. But in Nigeria here, you have our farmers doing far less, sometimes 10, 20% of what that should ordinarily produce. What's the issue? Because of lack of capacity and lack of modern technology that they need to use. When we have all of this in place, when we have the skills, when we have the manpower, and when government is also ready to work with business membership organizations like us, so that we can also help to boost the manpower and capacity of some of these producers in the value chain, it will help us to be able to boost our production. It will now help us to be able to see how we can also export outside Nigeria and gain more FX for the country.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Femi Egbesola. We may now need to interrupt our regular proceedings as we join a live broadcast from Malawi, where the president is speaking to the nation. Thank you for staying with us. I still have with me Dr. Femi Egbesola. Dr. Egbesola, thank you so much for staying with me.
You're welcome.
All right, let's just get it moving. Now, one of the challenges the private sector has highlighted is insufficient raw materials. And I'm just thinking here, would it not be useful to break down the deficit figures to see where local capacity can be built versus areas where import dependence will likely persist?
That's very correct. That's absolutely correct. We need to look at goods that we can realistically do here, and we begin to develop raw materials for it and the skills that we need to work on. And at the same time, we also need to identify the ones that we need to export. And this will now help us to focus on policies that can drive those two angles. And it will also help us to be able to focus on what we need to do now, so in the medium term and also in the long term.
All right. So apart from energy, which we've talked about extensively, and then quality and even market intelligence, I know there are other challenges that sort of bedevil manufacturing in Nigeria. But away from challenges, I'd like us to close on, solutions. What are the things we need to do, whether it's the policy side or even, the private sector side, to address all these issues? And maybe you can also highlight some of the plans of the federal government. We know there is that plan around 30% value addition. We also know there is another one about Nigeria first, something like that. I mean, let's have your take on all these.
All right, let me start from where you ended. That's the Nigerian first. If it is well enforced, I think that it's going to work for the good of Nigerians, because both government and public projects will be able to buy first from Nigeria before any other thing. And that will help to actually boost local products and local businesses. But at the same time, too, you must also ensure that when this is done, all other parameters that will make it work is also enforced. For example, quality must be well guarded. We must also ensure that government also pay timely, because one thing is to supply government, or for government to have procurement from small businesses. Another thing is to get their money back in record time and also avoid loopholes. And when it comes to the 30% value addition bill, I think that is also good in the sense that it will also help us to have a product process here at least to 30%. But at the same time, too, government must know that this is not enough. It is good for us to also allow government to ensure they give enough time. This should be done in phases. And it is also to be with that government wants to bring about infrastructure that will support this and enforce the policy to the letter. Talking about other things that government needs to do where you started with, I think we need to be thinking of building more industrial clusters with good power and shared facility for MSMEs. We also need to provide for them cheaper access to funds and with long repayment period. And it's also, too, it's good to see how we can strengthen our local content, particularly this Procurement Act, so that if it is enforced, we will have more demand for local products. I also support government supporting trade associations like our own to be able to help small business to be export ready, be able to comply with quality standards, and be able to build their capacity, not just to produce alone for the local demands, but also for export purposes. And eventually, maybe finally, we also help to look at how we can map out supply chains to see where local production can be boosted quickly and begin to put all our energies in that before we go to other parts of the value chain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, too, for your time and thoughts on the show, Dr. Femi Egbesola, President, Association of Small Business Owners of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.